And good morning. Rescue efforts continue at the plane crash site in the French Alps. We know now that the co-pilot who apparently crashed the plane on purpose into a mountain was being treated for some kind of illness that should have prevented him from being in the cockpit that day. To talk about this story, we're joined by former U.S. Air Captain and CBS News aviation and safety expert Sully Sullenberger, who joins us this morning from San Francisco. And Captain, all news is local, and I think the question most on the minds of many Americans this morning is simply this: could this have happened here on a U.S. carrier?
Well, Bob, we must do everything we can to prevent it from happening here. But there is one reason that this particular pilot could not have been an airline pilot in the U.S. currently, and that is that rules now require that airline pilots have at least 1,500 hours and an airline transport pilot license. That's about 2 or 2.5 times as much total flying experience as this one particular pilot had.
Well, are there safeguards in place? I know this is a rare thing for someone to commit suicide in the cockpit of an airplane, as happened, but it has happened before. Are there safeguards in place, and what are they exactly?
Well, we here in the U.S. have had two wonderful advantages for many decades. First, since after World War II until just recently, about 75% of all airline pilots in this country have been military-trained aviators. Of course, that means that they've been through a rigorous, very structured and disciplined screening process to become military pilots, and then they've been screened a second time to be hired as airline pilots. It's an important selection process that means that anybody who's doing this job is well suited by training and by temperament. And for those who were not military pilots, the training and hiring standards have been high enough that most civilian pilots have had multiple professional flying jobs and been screened by multiple employers prior to being hired by a major airline.
Well, could a pilot conceal that he was suffering from depression if he chose to? Do they have to volunteer that information, or do they undergo examinations, or what happens?
Pilots do undergo examinations. In fact, professional pilots are the most scrutinized professional group that exists. In the United States, pilots have to undergo an FAA medical examination every year if they're under 40 and every 6 months if they're older than 40. And we have to disclose every medical condition that might affect our fitness to fly. Not to do so makes us subject to severe penalties. We're also required to list every single doctor visit, specifically who we saw and for what purpose at the time of every medical examination. There may be some hiding going on, but it's been made somewhat better by a more enlightened approach that the FAA recently took in terms of mental health in 2010 by allowing pilots to be recertified to fly while still taking certain kinds of medication to improve their mood.
Captain, what are the safest airlines? Are you better off flying U.S. carriers and than you are flying some of these other carriers operating around the world?
There is variation in the safety rates of airlines around the world. The safest historically have been North America, Australia, New Zealand, parts of Europe. The Middle Eastern carriers that are ascendant have been very safe. Unfortunately, while we do have agreed upon international standards, they have become essentially recommendations, because in order for them to be implemented, each country must mandate that its airlines and those who use its airspace adhere to these standards. So there is variation, as we've seen this week. It was primarily U.S. carriers that had the two-person-in-the-cockpit rule. Many other carriers in the world did not until just recently.
All right. Well, Captain, thank you very much for being so candid with us this morning, and we appreciate you coming.